A new day, a new revelation about Maine Senate candidate Graham Platner. This time, several of his ex-girlfriends are reportedly speaking out, alleging Graham Platner has a history of heavy drinking, violent episodes, and strange behavior. Now, remember, this is the man Democrats are hanging their hats on to join the U.S. Senate, to get through the race, to beat Republican Susan Collins in Maine. Everything counts for them. We'll see if this changes anything. This is Outnumbered. I'm Harris Faulkner, here with my co-host Kayleigh McEnany. Also joining us today, Cheryl Casoni, Fox Business anchor and host of American Dream Home on Fox Business. Kayleigh McGee-White, Fox News contributor. And Griff Jenkins is here, co-host of Fox and Friends Weekend. Well, those allegations are detailed in a New York Times report. One of Graham Platner's ex-girlfriends reportedly says, quote, Mr. Platner could be rough with her, particularly when they were drinking, leaving her shaken and sometimes afraid. But she said he regularly grabbed her by the shoulders, sometimes hard enough to leave marks. During one argument, she recalled he twisted her arm behind her back, shoved her into a bedroom, and held the door closed from the other side so she couldn't get out, telling her to remain there until she was, quote unquote, calm. Well, that same woman is speaking up about Platner's Nazi-linked tattoo. You see it here. He has said he was unaware of the Nazi connection until recently, but his ex told The Times, quote, Mr. Platner knew when they were dating years ago that the tattoo was a Nazi symbol and that he called it my Totenkopf. I would never have known what that was, she said. He would joke about it being a Nazi tattoo. He told her that he and other members of his unit selected that tattoo because they were like a death unit. They were killers. Platner responded to the story last night.
There are some allegations in this piece that I just want to be kind of unequivocal about are simply not true. Anything alleging physicality, anything alleging that I knew what my tattoo was, these are the statements of someone who's politically motivated.
Man, imagine having to say those words all day long. Politico reports Democrats are furious over these allegations and are freaking out over their Maine Senate chances. They view Maine as a must-win seat to take control of the U.S. Senate. And despite that, though, one Gen Z activist has pulled her support from Platner's campaign. Here's the reason she gave.
I was wrong, so I'm rescinding a major endorsement today. Graham Platner disrespects women. Now, you're about to hear a whole lot of people try to minimize this, speculate about ulterior motives, or claim that this is just the behavior of a bad boyfriend. But we have the responsibility to do what is right, even when it is politically inconvenient. Women cannot be an acceptable sacrifice for the next election.
It's a gift for Republicans right now, Kayleigh.
It is. You know, I know Lindsay. I talked with her a little bit last week. I'm not close with her, but I have several friends in the D.C. area who are. And I want to focus on what the New York Times did to her. She's addressed this in some posts publicly late last night. But what the New York Times did to her is shameful. She told me that she trusted them. She invited them into her home to speak on record about these allegations. And she did so because they went to her. They found her and they told her, look, we have several other women who want to come forward with much more serious allegations against Graham Platner about his abusive behavior in the past. And your story is going to help corroborate those allegations. Your story is going to help it make it possible for those other women to come forward. And yet, if you read through the New York Times report, the entire story is about her work background, and her politics. And the reason that they did that is so that they didn't have to make the story about Graham Platner. Those other women and their serious allegations reportedly were not included because Platner's lawyers got involved. But those women are still out there. Those allegations are still out there. And quite frankly, to watch what the Democrats in particular are doing, I think of Senator Sheldon Whitehouse, who dismissed these as, these are not a lot, these are not very serious. These are the exact same people who said to believe all women, and who ran with allegations against Justice Brett Kavanaugh, allegations that to this day could not be corroborated to the effect to prove that Christine Blasey Ford was even in the same room as Brett Kavanaugh at any other point. Lindsay has multiple witnesses who can corroborate exactly what she said. I know that because I know those witnesses. And yet the New York Times didn't want to speak to any of them because they did not want to have to corroborate what was said against Graham Platner. They wanted to give Democrats the easy out to dismiss what was said as a political hit job. And I just got to say, as a young woman who has supported friends in situations just like this, I cannot tell you how disappointing it is. There was one quote from Lindsay in the New York Times report where she talked about the allegation where Graham Platner held her, twisted her arm behind her back. And she said, but it hurt, but it didn't cause an injury. It didn't break my arm. Anyone who has had a friend in a situation like this has heard that qualification. They know exactly why she said that, because it's very difficult to bring up and it's very difficult to justify when you're in a situation like that. Yes. And what the New York Times and the Democrats have done by treating Lindsay this way is they have made it almost impossible for other women to come forward with their stories of abuse by treating her like that. And so that is what I find extremely shameful about this situation. And I hope that Lindsay knows that she is supported, that she is loved, and that no other women should ever be treated or should go through something like that again.
Yeah, when I hear you, talking about your perspective on it and your friendship with Lindsay, it's called a catch and kill, where, they'll come out with a big story, they'll get it out there fast, they'll only include the facts they want, and then that's enough to keep everybody sort of satiated, and then you just kill it, you move on. I call it a catch, kill, and chill, because it chills the speech of the other people who might have similar situations going on as either witnesses or victims. In any case, that's what you're describing now. Now, one of the women that they talked with did boldly say she knows of 2 other women, and they are all, the 3 of them, trying to decide what to do next. The chill part could get broken. Griff?
Look, I think in the totality of what we've seen so far, this is a Democratic crisis. They have a major problem. You're seeing Bernie Sanders and others saying that Lindsay is Republican operative and this is political. No. This was a Nazi tattoo scandal. This was a horrific comments on a Reddit scandal. This was a sexting scandal with up to at least half a dozen women. And now it's 3 exes that are coming out saying that he is a toxic hot mess. At the end of the day, and to Kaylee's point, we have still not yet heard from the recipients, the 6 or more women that got those sexting pictures. That was last year when he was, even if they're adults, he was married. And so you wonder at what point does the Democrat Party say, we've got a problem because we're about to literally try and elect and run a candidate for the U.S. Senate who recently had a cameo on a Facebook page called Are We Dating the Same Guy? That's a problem for them, and I don't know how they get out of it.
Well, look, on the married part, the wife has pushed back. Everybody's pushed back. It's a personal thing with them. On that particular Kick app, though, that he was on, it's a personal situation for everybody. Because if there was somebody, and we don't know, we just know it's called a predator's paradise. And we know since 2022, they've been looking at that platform, and there are a lot of teenagers between the ages of 13 and 17 on that platform. So a lot of questions about it. And he opens Pandora's box when he says, and said it last night, oh no, I can absolutely say
nothing new.
That they were, well, they're nothing new, but that they were all adult women. How would he know? Even the platform has admitted that it doesn't have the best record at trying to prove how old one of the users might be on the platform. Maybe they've changed that in the recent past, but not when he was on it.
You have to wonder if some of these Democrats are going to change their tune, in particular as more and more details come out about him. The fact that he was a woman hater, that there were multiple women. They're now talking to each other and finding out that they were actually seeing him at the same time when he was doing all of this abusive behavior. So it wasn't just one at a time, it was 2 or 3 at a time. They didn't know about each other. Going back to that Nazi tattoo, though, one of our contributors at Fox Business, Gary Calpbound, he wrote a note this morning. He's not angry at him, he's angry at the Democrats. He is angry at Bernie Sanders, at Elizabeth Warren, and at Chuck Schumer for supporting somebody who, again, is wearing a tattoo. He knew exactly what that tattoo it means for the SS. And he said, look, he goes, shame on you. He said something else, but I'm like, I can't repeat it. He said, you're endorsing a man who honored the Holocaust. Maybe I have to remind the Democratic Party about Auschwitz. Maybe that's where we're at right now in this entire story. And he's somebody, and he says, I'm not just a Jew. He's like, I'm a big Jew. I'm a tough Jew. And he's angry. He's angry. And he said, enough is enough. The other thing I will say here is that, if this guy, if all these allegations are proven true, and I think there's more coming, they're going to have to come back and they're going to have to address this. You can't say that you're part of the Me Too movement and then completely ignore these women. And you're right, shame on the New York Times for what they did to her. You know that they went to her house multiple times. We need more, we need more, we need more. That post this morning she put on X, she said they told her, don't talk to anybody, don't talk to anybody. That took weeks. Her story could have been out here weeks ago. But the New York Times reporters are the ones that pushed it down and basically, I think, sat on it. I see it as a journalist.
I have journalistic concerns and questions Were they telling Platner's campaign as they were collecting all this information and maybe giving them a heads up and giving them a chance to get out ahead of this? We'll never know. But that would be my #1 question.
Yeah, last night I watched that nearly 30-minute interview with Graham Platner. Very little pushback from MS. Now you'd expect that. That's a left-wing think tank over there. But here's what is so disappointing about the New York Times. Not only did they not do justice to this woman's story, the New York Times laid the groundwork for that man's defense. It as if they were defense attorneys for Graham Platner. Why do I say that? Because when you listen to Lindsay Fifield and you read her post, it's very diligent. She didn't want to tell her story, to Kaylee's point, but when she saw Eric Swalwell's nameplate get removed, she said, quote, "It felt like fate." So she opened up to the New York Times, trusting them. They're the gray lady, right? They're going to do journalistic work with her story. She gave them diary pages. She gave them screenshots of text. She gave them contacts. Now, what does a journalist do with that? You call the contacts, you include the screenshots, you include the diary pages. You lay out her side of the story, and then you get his side of the story. But they did not. They left out her corroborating evidence entirely. They left out the stories of 2 other women, and she is left to read these pages and see they took her quote out of context, she says, left out the screenshots, did not include that she is also associated with Democrats. She supported local Democrats. She has Democrats in her family. Left that out. Instead, they devote 11 paragraphs to her career in conservative politics. 11 paragraphs. The story's not about her, mind you. It's about that man there. And then I have questions for Ro Khanna, who's about to rally with this man tonight. Well, Mr. Khanna has tweeted before in 2018, "I believe Dr. Christine Blasey Ford. I believe Deborah Ramirez. I believe Anita Hill. Brett Kavanaugh should not be on the Supreme Court." Do you believe Lindsay Fifield? Why are you going to rally with this man tonight? You say that he's wrong, he's toxic, he's acknowledged it, and he is redemption. He deserves redemption, is what Ro Khanna said. But I didn't hear acknowledgement of Lindsay Fifield's claim. I heard pushback of Lindsay Fifield's claim. Pick up the phone, call Lindsay, have a conversation with her. Lindsay said this. I will leave you with this note. She's a woman of Christ. She is a mother. And she has said, I have it right here. I want to pull it up because I think it's very important. "I mean this truly. At the end of the day, I've won. As I hold my children, wash their sticky faces, I have won. But may I never boast except in the cross of our Lord Jesus Christ." Pick up the phone. Talk to her, Ro Khanna. Pick up the phone, Democrats. Talk to her if you believe all women.
Okay. Wow. That's a lot. And will he apologize? Because if he really wants redemption, that's what it's going to take.
Yep.
Yeah.
Exactly.
To even approach it.
Yep.
But then he'd have to admit it. Wow, that's a long road between now and Tuesday.
I don't think he lasts.
Well, and my question for Ro Khanna is, if you read the allegations, if you actually spend the time to read what Lindsay says that Graham Platner did to her, the question you should be asking yourself is, if your daughter or your mother or one of your friends came to you and said that's how she was treated, would you vote for that man? I wouldn't.
Be sure to like and subscribe for all the Fox News latest on YouTube and catch full shows streaming now on Fox One.